Welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast, where today's brightest minds in the medical device industry go to get their most useful and actionable insider knowledge direct from some of the world's leading medical device experts and companies.
You know, there are some sources that claim that you should be spending about a third of your product development project just defining good requirements. I happen to believe requirements are very important to the success of any new product development, especially a medical device product. On this episode of the Global Medical Device Podcast, I speak with Devin Mack. Devin is with Enqual, and he has a lot of expertise on new product development processes and especially around requirements, definition, and management. So enjoy this episode of the Global Medical Device Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast. This is your host and founder at Greenlight Guru, Jon Speer. I'm pretty excited about this one. I've been having an opportunity to get to know our guest a little bit today ahead of this conversation. But joining me today is Devin Mack. Devin is an ASQ Black Belt mechanical engineer, and he's the owner of Enqual LLC. And you can check out more about Enqual at www.enqual.us. So Devin, welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast.
Oh, thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I guess before we dive too deep today, tell the world a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Enqual.
Sure. I've been an engineer for about 28 years, graduated college, University of Rochester, originally from Brooklyn, New York. And I've known I wanted to be an engineer since I was about 7 years old. My siblings are very much older than me. So one of their friends were home from college with them, and they asked what I liked to do when I was growing up. And at the time I was building models. I was part of the Rebel Model Builders Club. And he gave me that label. He said, "Oh, you want to be a mechanical engineer." So that was the goal since I was 7 and came to fruition roughly 28 years ago. Worked in a lot of different industries, got introduced into medical device during my time at Bausch & Lomb in 1995. And even when I was a permanent employee, I've always been more a part of, I would say, an internal tiger team of sorts. So that exposed me to a lot of different areas of the business. Initially, when I first started my career, it was in new product development. And I was an essential cog in that process where I was using finite element analysis to analyze the feasibility of designs. Anyway, fast forward to today, I've been consulting on my own the last 4 years, helping various companies out in a number of different capacities. All the while I got my engineering background, I'm able to switch pretty easily between an strictly engineering role or a role that more heavily emphasizes quality. And so, so there you have it, the name of my company, Enqual. So engineer and quality, because from my perspective, I provide a good balance between both.
Yeah, I love the background. And, like you, I too am also an engineer, and I knew not quite at age 7, but I knew at a pretty young age that was a field that I wanted to get into. I just thought it was fascinating. When I was younger, I always had this passion, or this curiosity is probably a better way to describe it, how things work. So I oftentimes would take things apart, whether it be a toy that I had or what have you, and most of the time figure out how to put it back together. But that was always pretty fascinating to me.
Yeah, definitely very interesting. In fact, when I was very young, my mom bought me an encyclopedia set, and that was the title, How Things Worked. So I was
cool.
She nurtured my curiosity in
awesome.
that regard.
That is awesome. Well, today I thought we would kind of peel back some of the layers, so to speak, and probe into some areas that you're passionate about and that you have a lot of expertise. I thought we could focus, well, it happens to be a passion of mine as well, but I thought we could focus more on the new product development, which, sort of encompasses things like design control today. And, I've been perusing your website. Again, folks, that's enqual.us, and there's lots of good graphics and images and a lot of pictures. And I think that the old adage is true that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And you've put a lot of thought into this. So I guess just jumping right into the middle, from a new product development standpoint, I guess especially with respect to the medical device industry, what is maybe one or two biggest challenges that you see companies are faced with these days with respect to that process?
Well, surprisingly enough, it would happen that a big challenge is the establishment of proper requirements, making sure that customer requirements are well defined in order to establish those technical requirements as you go through the development process.
Yeah, I think I read this, and I can't remember the exact source. It might be the FDA Design Control Guidance document, but it's something along those lines, where it said something about a third of a project should be focused on defining good requirements or something like that. I'm definitely paraphrasing, but it was a significant chunk of a new product development project should be focused on requirements. And I don't know about you, but in my experience, that rarely seems to be the case. What have you seen in practice, either good or bad, with respect to good requirements definition?
Yeah, I guess, it's one of those things over the course of my career that people continue to struggle with, I believe. There have been companies that have done it better than others, but I don't think the needle has been moved significantly enough in the positive direction that it's no longer an issue of concern. So I find that when there's a lot of chaos, it's typically because the time wasn't taken to properly define the requirements of the product that they're hoping to launch within the deadline that they've set.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll dive into that, some of the downsides of poor requirements definition here in a moment. I can think back to a lot of projects where, there is some skills that you can learn, some experience that you can bring to the table when you're defining requirements. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of art to this as well. Can you maybe suggest or provide some tips or pointers to those listening on how they should dive into good process for defining requirements?
Sure. I would say definitely have an open communication between your customers, both internal and external, and your development team. You find that many times certain critical members of your team aren't involved early enough on in the process. So, what I mean by that is, you might be talking to the customer, but it's just you and the customer. You haven't let quality know, you haven't let manufacturing know, maybe you haven't let the regulatory know. Everybody as a cross-functional team should be involved early on in the process. Even when it comes to initial considerations in the concept phase, it should be a cross-functional effort. And I think a lot of surprises happen further down the line because of that lack of cross-functional involvement.
Totally. I don't know if this is a root cause. I know you also have some expertise in CAPAs, and we may or may not dive into that topic later today or not. I'm not sure yet. But I think if I were to identify a potential candidate for root cause, I think a lot of companies almost assume that engineering is synonymous with product development. And my particular view is product development is an enterprise-wide cross-functional discipline that certainly includes engineering, but to your point, includes quality and manufacturing and regulatory and marketing and probably sales and probably quite a few other functions that I'm missing. It seems to me, though, that, and maybe this is conventional wisdom, maybe this is just head trash, it seems to me that oftentimes stakeholders other than engineering, for whatever reason, don't seem interested in participating in such an activity as requirements definition. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. I run into that more often now than I did 20 years ago when I started my career. I was very fortunate to work for, a couple large companies that were number one at what they did. And it was eye-opening to me, at least, even as a young engineer, to see the level of cross integration on projects. The marketing person was there in the room, the quality, the product, the development engineer, the R&D engineer. Everybody was in the room when it came to doing failure modes and effects analysis, as well as creating surveys to get voice of the customer surveys constructed or framed. And I would say the first two large companies that I've worked for, that's what they did. Everybody was in the room, present, and you're able to hear the opinions of everyone. Nowadays, I believe, some companies can become siloed, even though they might practice against that. There's still a little bit of siloed activity or barriers, I should say, that hinder the speed of development and the accuracy of capturing the voice of the customer so that you're able to well define those requirements that are critical in setting your technical requirement goals.
Totally. I mean, I like you. I early on in my career, I had some really formative experiences that I was blessed, to be quite honest, and I certainly appreciate that. 20 plus years later, that the group that I was with, I don't know if it was intentional or by design. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say yes, it was intentional. Yes, it was by design. But we had this cross-functional team that was integrally part of the design and development process, or new product development process. And so everybody had a voice and a seat at the table when we were going through requirements. And I just found that to be so fulfilling. And I was a little shocked later in my career to learn that not everybody operates that way. And so I was like, well, how do we get people back to doing so? And I guess, maybe we'll leave that as an action item for those listening, that this is something that I think is really important for you all to figure out how to incorporate cross-functionality into your new product development process, especially with respect to requirements. And how do you get those stakeholders, marketing and sales and quality and regulatory and manufacturing and so on and so forth, involved in the conversation? This is your homework, folks who are listening, to try to explore that and figure that out. But let's talk a little bit about what happens when those stakeholders aren't involved in the process. What are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the gotchas? What are some of the challenges that you've observed in your experience?
Well, what could happen is your development team could start marching down a road where the things that they're working on aren't important to the customer. And so they don't directly tie to customer satisfaction. They don't tie to being or having a competitive edge. And basically, you could end up with a product that is not valued on the market, or it's not competitive on the market. And that could be because it's just something mundane in the end to what the market is looking for at that particular time.
Yeah, one of the other, sort of in the same vein, things that I've seen or observed is, I mean, I love engineers. You're an engineer. I'm an engineer. I, for the most part, understand how engineers operate or how they're wired. And I guess I'll point the finger at myself. I know there have been times in my past where I thought that I had the information that I needed from customer or from those within my organization that represented that voice of customer, and I kind of put my head down and came up with these requirements, which I was sometimes too proud of those requirements, but nonetheless, somewhere along that way, I would build prototypes and go through multiple other stages of the product development process. I mean, it could be 6, 9, 12 months later before I have something that's far enough along to bring to the table to share with other stakeholders like regulatory and quality and marketing. And I had one experience in particular that the person who initially brought me the information from a voice of customer perspective, some months had passed and I came to them with that prototype, my interpretation of what that needed to be. And they didn't even know it was the same product. They because I put so much finesse in it, I probably over-engineered it. I probably was trying to make the perfect device, and I thought that I knew, this would be important and that would be important. And turns out I really missed the mark.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say that, I was very fortunate to be in a role early on in my career where I was, the senior product development engineer for this new product. But also another part of my role was to give a monthly update on the team's capability to meeting the customer's specifications. So I would have to, I had to develop a stoplight diagram for each specification that the customer required. And I had to give a monthly report on that, on the team's capability of meeting those targets. So that kept at least my mindset to help coach the team and prevent them from going too far down a road that wasn't focused on a particular specification.
That sounds like a really insightful methodology and approach. How did you develop that? I mean, was this a process that you sort of fell into, or was this a methodology that you adapted?
I think it was just a process that I was given the goals, right? So they wanted a way to track how the team was doing versus the customer specifications. And I just kind of came up with that stoplight chart, red light, green, or a yellow circle to show, the team's progress. I had daily interaction with all facets of the team, which included development, manufacturing, marketing, and the customer themselves. I was doing a lot of travel back then, both within the United States and outside. But that's the way I kept a handle on it. So I guess I was kind of doubling a role between, development engineer and, like a program manager of sorts.
Yeah.
I'd say, early on in my career, I noticed that a lot of the engineers, or at least those engineers that were like me, were expected to track their activity, in a program like MS Project, like a program manager role. So we had to wear both hats, not only, what we were doing, but we also had to track our own projects per schedule. As time has gone on, these roles have kind of split off. So you have your planners, your schedulers, and you have all these different facets. But back when I was a very young engineer, all of those facets were combined into one person.
Yeah, I same for me, similar. And I'm going to take a short break, but when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about your stoplight methodology and how that may actually be a way to effectively manage a product development process in an agile approach. But we'll come back to that here in a moment. Folks, I want to remind you that I'm talking with Devin Mack. Devin is with Enqual, Enqual.us, ENQUAL.us. He has expertise in new product development and design controls and design history file remediation, quality system improvements, and Kappa. Devin is also a partner of ours at Greenlight Guru. Yes, that's right. We have a very robust partner program where we work with folks like Devin and others who complement what the Greenlight Guru software platform does, and that's help companies with their quality management system. It helps them with their design controls and risk management, as well as all the post-market quality event workflows. Devin also has this distinction that he's he's actually the first partner in our partner program who's ever gone through our brand new Greenlight Guru Partner Guru certification program. Devin, tell us all a little bit about that experience of going through the Guru certification.
I had some great coaches at Greenlight to help me along the way and point me in the right direction, providing me with the information. Of course, they gave me a great introduction about the partner program and, what it was and how it could become a great tool to not only promote the partnership program, but also give exposure to the great capabilities of the software that would enable companies to be more efficient at things like design control or documenting risk management, managing the change management process. So I thought it was a great experience to go through that training program, and it was actually refreshing to see those key foundational pillars that are already embedded into that the Greenlight Guru software. So for me, it was a great experience, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it before, but early on in my career, I worked for companies, very large companies that were number one at what they did. And so they did a lot of things that were and probably still are considered best practices. Before a lot of these the new names like design control and product development maybe became more mainstay. Those are actually practices that those leading companies performed internally, maybe 30, 40 years ago, right? So slowly but surely, those practices have developed into, those guidelines and now regulations that we work with today. So for me, it's been more of, refreshing to see how those best practices are now incorporated into the software, and they can actually, because of that, they can actually help to maintain that those companies that implement the software are on the right road or on the right track to having an efficient and effective process to launch their products.
Absolutely, and folks, the reason we partner with firms like Enqual and people like Devin Mack is, sometimes you might need a little bit more help through your process. And so, learn about the Greenlight Guru Partner Program, whether you're a medical device company or if you're someone who maybe wants to explore being a partner with us. Go to www.greenlight.guru/partners. And you can request more information. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you. We'd be happy to share with you the Partner Guru Certification Program. It's a learning management approach. Go at your own pace. It connects the dots of what's important from an FDA, ISO 1345, 14971 perspective, but connects it to how that is implemented within the Greenlight medical device quality management system software platform. So check that out. All right. So Devin, right before we take that short break, I'm still fascinated by your stoplight methodology. I don't know if that's your official name for it, but that's the name that I'm forever going to think about your approach, because it makes perfect sense. I mean, we can all envision a stoplight. To me, as you were describing that, and let me give you a little bit of background. Sometimes I think there's this, I don't want to say unnecessary, but there's this debate about medical device product development and the type of methodology that one can employ to design and develop products. Some people think that because it's a regulated medical device, that thou shalt follow a waterfall or a stage gate type of methodology. And I don't ascribe to that. I'm like, no, I mean, it can be, there's nothing wrong with that, but it could just as easily be a pure agile methodology as well. And as you were describing your red light, yellow light, green light, I was thinking, oh, that would be a really good way to embrace agile methodology. Have you thought about that and or have any other context with respect to that?
Well, I see, product development has always been an iterative process. And, I see how, the agile methodology marries up to that method of thinking fairly well, like we mentioned. But I think it also is important to constantly evaluate where you are with your respect to your requirements. So maybe, very similar to Six Sigma, maybe agile for some, they're resistant to transition to that or fully train people to that. Or if they do train them, they still don't fully implement it in their way of doing business. But I see it as an effective method if used properly. So, as with anything, they have to make sure that they're implementing it the right way, or at least have the right facilitators to guide them through this iterative process, which I would have to say that 20, 30 years ago, at least for the leading companies in engineering and science, that was just the way they did things. But I guess that would be my take on it.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, agile is a newer term that sort of became in vogue with respect to best practices from a software development standpoint. And while I have worked on plenty of software related projects, my early years were almost purely mechanical. And I agree with you that even with a mechanical product, we didn't call it agile then because the term hadn't been coined just yet. But we did an iterative approach where, I would build a prototype sometimes to help me understand the voice of customer, or sometimes as a means to communicate with that customer. Sometimes I would build a prototype to help me better define requirements. And yet still I might build other prototypes to do some preliminary bench testing, but it was always iterative. It was always learn from this thing that I did so that I can go back to that requirements, because I totally agree with you. The requirements is the foundation for success for any new product development, especially for a medical device product. And towards the beginning of our conversation today, you hinted at some of or we sort of danced around a little bit of some of the pitfalls or the challenges if you don't do this well. I think this is, now that we've talked a little bit further, hopefully this is becoming a little bit more obvious to those listening that, the requirements is that foundation. I always call it or refer to it or think of it as kind of like the contract, so to speak, that we have to deliver this awesome new product.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's, thinking back now, companies used to take a lot of time and money to invest in capturing that voice of the customer and what they wanted, because one of the big mantras, at least back then, was get it right the first time, right? So a lot of time was invested to develop what we would call today usability models, or engineering models, to ensure that the product was going to be ideal for its intended use, and at least what they claimed that the product could do. So the indications.
Yeah.
So I think what happens then is another pitfall is you can get these competing factions within a team, and it all could root back to the lack of proper requirements. So you could have your development team uh, very, against your quality team, against your regulatory team, against your manufacturing team. And okay, sure, eventually they might get it out the door, but at the end of the day, uh, your team members, they end up not liking each other. Um, so
Yeah.
when it comes to the next project, that team has to, everybody from those same areas have to work together, no matter what project that they're going to be working on. And so it just makes things more difficult. I've seen situations where certain areas are excluded from meetings, and so your whole communication system breaks down. And you could, actually, I've seen some companies get to the point where they haven't introduced a new product in 8 to 10 years or more. So your development process becomes stagnant.
Yeah, for sure. Devin, to wrap our conversation up today, I guess give folks some perspective, either in the form of pragmatic tools and tips that they can leave this after listening to this with, and start to implement at their company, and or possible ways that they could connect with you and seek your expertise for some sort of engagement to help them.
Sure. Definitely. I've got contact information on my website, www.enqual.us. And I'm available to talk to anybody, to implement, these tools about how teams can communicate better within each other, or within the company. Even in today's world, where everybody's on a Teams meeting or video conferencing through some method, it's still possible for the team to work together. So that communication or different communication tools are very important. And then when it comes to the technical aspects, creating your process maps and true process maps to understand the inputs and outputs of each step or each function. And then, of course, having a good handle on your design control process and those critical items that feed into it, especially with the new EU MDR requirements, having a good understanding of your commercialization post-market phases and how those feed back into your concept and development process is very important. And having the proper understanding of when these cross-functional teams need to be involved, and to what extent, and having that defined on paper of some sort, so you can document your methodologies and your reasonings as you go through your product development process.
Absolutely. That's great advice for those listening. The one word that I picked up on of all the awesome tips and pointers that you just shared is communication. And it's easy to say and hard to do, but communication in any project I've ever worked on, whether it was some sort of challenge or obstacle, if I were to identify a singular root cause, which is maybe possible, it always seems to stem from the communication could have been better. It could have been more robust. I could over-communicate. So I think that's a really key thing to leave folks with. Devin, thank you so much for being a guest on the Global Medical Device Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, John. And maybe if you need me to, I could come back and visit.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love that. There's so much more we could talk about. I'm quite sure. So we'll definitely make a point to do that. Folks, again, Devin Mack. Devin is with Enqual, ENQUAL.us. Reach out to learn more. As I mentioned, Devin is a partner of ours at Greenlight Guru. Greenlight Guru is the only medical device quality management system software platform in the world today. It's designed specifically and only for the medical device industry, and it's been designed by actual medical device people. Yeah, that's right. We have gurus who work at Greenlight Guru, who work in the medical device industry for many years prior to joining Greenlight, and they have been through a lot of the same challenges and obstacles and things that you're dealing with. So they have a lot of experience, and all of that experience shapes the Greenlight Guru medical device QMS. So check it out, www.greenlight.guru, to learn more. As always, thank you for keeping the Global Medical Device Podcast as the #1 podcast in the medical device industry. It's all because of you, our loyal listeners. Continue to spread the word to your friends and colleagues. And until next time, this is your host and founder at Greenlight Guru, Jon Speer, and you have been listening to the Global Medical Device Podcast.